take you through the format for today. BSGs, just while we're settling down and finding a spot, I'm going to briefly take you through the format for today. We will begin with Jury giving a welcome. Thereafter, Nonku will share her wonderful story with us. We'll then enter into a panel discussion and Jury will close. Cool. So in May, BSGers across Johannesburg and Cape Town came together to attend Imbizo. This was an opportunity for each of us to come together and strengthen our culture. The theme for Imbizo was centered around owning your own story, courage, vulnerability, and the growth that comes with this. We were privileged enough to be engaged by wonderful speakers, the likes of Professor Shirley Zinn, Professor Jonathan Jansen, Sim Shabalala, and the also charismatic Bonang Mohale. It's a pity Remo's not here today. So Shirley so eloquently put it as create humanness in leadership by being your real self, being your real self, anchored in your values. And that is so fitting. Why are we here today? So driven by our unique culture and with the support of the IND board, BSG is aiming to create their own inclusive story, one that encourages open dialogue, courageous conversations, and leading from our own spaces. With that, I would like to welcome our CEO, Jury.
Morning, everyone. To all the BSGers across Cape Town, morning Cape Town and Johannesburg. To our external guests, I saw Jaslyn waiting for a couple of more people to join us, but to Nonku and to Nonku Sister, thank you for joining us this morning. Thank you to all of you for prioritizing being here this morning, as opposed to all the other things you could have spent your time on. We're all busy. I know that there are lots of demands and deadlines in your projects and your roles in other parts of your business. So it's a great opportunity to be able to get together today, spend some quality time celebrating women. In terms of our priorities as a business, we're very proudly a homegrown South African consulting and technology firm. And as you know, we're very purposeful in what we choose to do. We've made a commitment as an organization to transform and play our role as an organization within South Africa. And our reasons for doing that, it's not to be able to achieve an EE target or an IND target, is to make sure that we are an organization that creates opportunities for all. To make sure that we are an organization that is representative of the country around us. That we're an organization that has role models in leadership roles for everybody within BSG. We've made some progress in line with that, but we have a long way to go. And that's why I'd also really like to recognize the efforts and the drive from the IND board led by Nondu in really making sure that this is a focus for us as an organization. In terms of my role in the context of that change, so I can't change my ethnicity, I can't change my culture, I suppose I could change my gender, but the things that I can do is I can make sure that as an organization, we have a priority and a focus on ensuring that we better understand diversity, that we are more inclusive, and that we create capacity and focus to drive out that change. And today's really about doing that. It's about being able to talk, it's about being able to engage, it's about being able to learn together. I'd like to introduce you to Nonku. Now, our marketing team have pointed out, very strangely, near the end of the second decade of the 2000s, that despite being a very successful business executive, Nonku has next to no social media profile. So I will share my own experiences in terms of how I got to know Nonku and our journey to date. So I met Nonku almost exactly 18 years ago, 1st of September 2000. I remember the day clearly because it was the day I'd moved up to Johannesburg and I started working at Accenture. It was the day in induction, the partner who'd been in the firm for 20 years said, "We're not the kind of organization that puts you on a project straight away. You'll spend 3 to 4 weeks in induction and training, getting to understand Accenture extremely well, and then you'll be well equipped to get on the ground and start delivering." An hour later, I got a call, this was a Friday, saying, "You're starting on a project on Monday." And please meet the project team this afternoon. in the office. So I was nervous. I was apprehensive. I felt like I hadn't gone through the induction that would prepare me for this role. And I was so thankful to meet the team, and first and foremost to meet Nonku, who I immediately realized was a force of nature. Nonku was welcoming, friendly, open, energetic, and played a great role in helping me to close some of those gaps and understand what was expected of a consultant within Accenture at the time. Nonku's role on that project, so we were implementing an SAP plant maintenance solution across all of Eskom's power stations. The stakeholder profile, so Nonku's role was in helping to drive out the change across those power stations and those users. So making sure that this group of stakeholders who are highly technical, who'd been in the business for a long time, who understood anything and everything about power stations and maintenance, and who were typically older, white, male, Afrikaners, would adopt this new technology that we were introducing. And Nonku's ability to engage them, manage them, challenge them, and ultimately make sure that they adopted the solution was remarkable. Nothing was too much to ask for Nonku. She even arranged a date for me to the UN function that year. So we worked together for about a year, and then as it happens, you move on to different projects. About a year after that, Nonku left the world of consulting to join Discovery. And then our paths didn't cross for a while, until about 5 years ago at a family-friendly restaurant just up the road here, where we managed to have a cup of coffee while somebody looked after our kids and caught up. And it was very clear that in the time that Nonku had spent at Discovery, once again, Nonku had just taken everything in her stride and had excelled and grown in her leadership role in heading up people and change within Discovery Health, in becoming a member of the Discovery Health Exco. And now Nonku has taken on new challenges within Discovery Health and looking at new products and alternative revenue streams. So Nonku, we are so grateful that you've made the time to join us this morning. We look forward to you sharing your wisdom, insights, experiences, anything that you would like to with us this morning. Thank you for joining us.
Wow, plant maintenance, it takes me back. Thank you so much. It's such a privilege, and thank you so much for inviting me. Oh, brilliant. Oh, just one thing, and I have a video on one of the slides, but you'll see it. Am I speaking to the right people? I'm looking at the back. Okay. If I could say video and it plays and then back to slides. Thank you. Thank you so much for that warm introduction and that journey down memory lane. I'm going to try to maybe fill in a few of the other gaps just to give you a comprehensive view of who I've become since the days of plant maintenance, driving an Italian sports car called an Uno at the power station. Come a long way. Big components of my life. So I'm a mom of two, a gorgeous 8-year-old and a 10-year-old little girl. They're both going on 21. This is objective empirical data coming from opinions. So that's a big part of my life. The second big part of my life is that I'm Nonku, a human being. And even though social media is not a big part of my life, and I probably need to improve it, I enjoy a lot of things, including great wine, traveling. I have a very robust community of friends and family that I mingle with. I started piano this year just to diversify my skills, expand. I love property. I was telling Jury earlier that I'm a property mogul in the making, so I'm starting to gather some property. And yeah, so I really think from that perspective, there's quite a rich life. At Discovery, I've been there 14 years. I wear blue underwear, literally, and forget. I did a talk, and we had guys on the screen in our Cape Town office. And when I said I wear blue underwear, literally, like you could see them like wanting to look. So, no, I'm not sure. But it's been, for me, an incredible organization. I've been there for 14 years now. I literally left Accenture and I went to Discovery. I went there for a very noble reason. At the time, we're starting the startup, which was Pru Health in the UK. And Very importantly, you know, amongst everything that I would gain, including new skills, new region in terms of work and understanding a new environment, I also had a boyfriend that lived there and I could travel for free over that time. So in that 14 years, I've worked 6 roles, so 2 and a bit years per role, but certain roles longer than others, really enriching experiences, and hopefully I'll get to share a bit of my story around that. I think the last 2 experiences, one being the head of Discovery Health People, which I did for about 5 years, and then took a sabbatical, and the second role being the role I do right now, which is running sort of a few of our new businesses that are, and really the want there is to offer comprehensive products to our clients in terms of health and wellness, that whenever you think of a solution that you need for your organization from a health and wellness perspective, not only will we offer you the health medical scheme component, we can offer you end-to-end solutions for your low-income earners, integrated products, etc. That does something powerful in terms of integrating our clients with us, but also does something quite powerful in terms of diversifying our revenue stream, which for a very long time has focused on administering and managing healthcare for employers. And that's sort of where I sort of live a key part of my life. So if maybe I can start. The idea here, guys, is that I'm just going to share my journey. Our heels ahead. Isn't that cool? Oh, goodness, the pink doesn't reflect so well. Okay. Hopefully the other slides won't be as bad. But really the idea here, and I was really quite taken, I think, I took it in, your story around sort of owning and telling your own stories. And stories are really about, they are about courage, about vulnerability, even in the work environment, and the ability to bring your authentic self and be powerful and own that authentic self. So I'm just going to tell my story, focusing on probably the 5 key things that I think I have learned and have stood me in good stead through my career and through life in general. So some of these stories will be very much based around my career and what I've learned through it, and some of these stories will just be based on my life as a human being, being vulnerable and real and courageous in the world. So the 5 things that I wanted to touch on, the first one is that we dealt different cards and we have to play them. You know, this is life. Nobody said it was fair. If you expect it to be, I'm sorry, you've got to start again, maybe another universe. And so we just start in different places. Some of us, you know, have drawbacks because of race. Many of us in this room, because of our gender, we probably would have gone further, but haven't gone as far. Some of us because we lost parents. All I'm saying is that you have cards that you've been dealt, and how you play those cards is more important than just the cards that you get. Then it takes 10,000 hours. Who's read Outliers? Oh, who hasn't read Outliers? I'll touch on that just now. Then change is the catalyst for growth, and I'll give you a bit of my personal story. Number 4, people matter, and number 5, the soil that you plant in needs to be fertile.
Hey, line up! Line up! Everybody line up! We're about to race! Everybody line up! Shoulder to shoulder, take off your backpacks. Basketball, line up, we're about to race. Hey, we are racing for a $100 bill. The winner of this race will take this. It's a $100 bill. Before I say go, I'm going to make a couple statements. If those statements apply to you, I want you to take 2 steps forward. If those statements don't apply to you, I want you to stay right where you're at. Take 2 steps forward if both of your parents are still married. Take 2 steps forward if you grew up with a father figure in the home. Take 2 steps forward if you had access to a private education. Take 2 steps forward if you had access to a free tutor growing up. Take 2 steps forward if you've never had to worry about your cell phone being shut off. Take 2 steps forward if you've never had to help mom or dad with the bills. Take 2 steps forward if it wasn't because of your athletic ability. You don't have to pay for college. Take 2 steps forward if you never wondered where your next meal was going to come from. I want you guys up here in the front just to turn around and look. Every statement I've made has nothing to do with anything any of you have done. Has nothing to do with decisions you've made. Everything I have said has nothing to do with what you've done. We all know these people up here have a better opportunity to win this $100. Does that mean these people back here can't race? No. We would be foolish to not realize we've been given more opportunity. We don't want to recognize that we've been given a head start. But the reality is we have. Now, there's no excuse. They still got to run their race. You still got to run your race. But whoever wins this $100, I think it'd be extremely foolish of you not to utilize that and learn more about somebody else's story. Because the reality is, if this was a fair race and everybody was back on that line, I guarantee you some of these black dudes would smoke all of you. And it's only because you have this big of a head start that you're possibly going to win this race called life. That is a picture of life, ladies and gentlemen. Nothing you've done has put you in the lead that you're in right now. When I say go, on your mark, get set, go! If you didn't learn anything from this activity, you're a fool.
I hope it makes the point. We started different parts of the race. I hope you could see that some of those guys at the back, when the race was being run, pushed quite hard to be in the front. And I think what's important and what I realized also in terms of my career and my life is that regardless of where I start, it's a race that I have to run and I have to utilize the tools that I have in my possession in order to run that race. So where do we start as women? I thought I would pull out some research very quickly because the picture I think can look quite bleak, but I think it's also important just to understand sort of the cards we've been dealt today. So only 5% of CEOs in the private sector in Africa today are women. In South Africa, that makes up about 4%. Only 2.2 of the JSE listed companies have CEOs in this country that are women. Of the 40 top JSE listed companies, only Maria Ramos. Quite a scary picture in 2018, right? If you look at where most women play, even though most women, or a significant amount of women has started to rise in terms of executive leadership driven by obviously legislation, as well as, I guess, companies being socially responsible. A lot of those people occupy what they call staff roles or support roles. So we are in HR or women, all very important roles, or in marketing or communication, etc. But those roles don't set us up to be CEOs of businesses. They don't set us up for C-suite. You need to learn how to run a business in order to run a business sort of in the future. And then you'll see that of executives in Africa, only 56% who are of all women who are in executive positions, 56% of those occupy staff roles, which means we also not solving for the future. What is for me, what is the saddest thing is that women drive about 70 to 80% of all global consumption. We make decisions around what is used in our homes, what is used with our kids, with our husbands, etc. And therefore, what powerful role players we could be if in a business we placed in a way that we can influence some of those decisions that will sort of drive consumption. So that's our picture, the hand that we dealt today and what we have to work with. Then I thought I would introduce you to a very cute little girl with an afro. Excuse the writing, I was going for pink. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the cards that I was dealt, because I wanted to tell you a bit of my story. So I think it's also important, and I show you the previous picture around what's happening with women in this country, in Africa, and I guess globally. And the picture doesn't look very different, whether you look regionally or you look globally. But with every picture, there are some things that you have in your arsenal that are very powerful and positive and potent. And in other, oh, thank you. And there are things that obviously work against you. But I think what's important is to understand the full package and not some of it. So I think for me, these are some of the key anchors. I think I grew up with a very close family, a lot of love, a sense of self, a huge amount of confidence, thanks to my mom and the strong woman role model in my life. And I was privileged at some point in my life to also go to a private school. Those are all things that counted sort of in my favor. But also in my life, we've had a lot of financial challenges. I remember my mom used to say, and I was reminding her, we drove down to Durban together last week, and I was reminding her, I was like, Mommy, you remember you used to say, I have 20 rands between me and poverty. But it wasn't a figure of speech. And that was, for me, what was frightening, because I sit today and I think about like everyday life. You know, you spend money, you go to a restaurant, you order champagne, and it doesn't occur to you that, thank you, Jesus, but today I don't have to worry about month end. Whether month end comes or hasn't come, I'm in a good place. And she says, and Nonku, I meant it. There was literally 20 rands between today, maybe that was a Monday, and she was getting paid next week Monday. So that if there was an emergency for our lunch money, it was literally 20 rands between her and starvation. And then I also remember journeys such as, you know, you'd go to school, and we went to a private school at some point in our lives, and we're very, very blessed and privileged. But there were many seasons where we couldn't pay school fees. So what the school would do is give you an envelope at the end of the school term, obviously that you take home with your report. And if you haven't paid your fees, you don't get an envelope. And I mean, for a little girl, that is more than traumatic, because envelopes are being handed out, you, not you, you know. And the not you would usually be the black kids in the class, but I managed to be not me for a very long time. The school got more sophisticated and the basics became basic, like give me an envelope, even if it's just a bill inside and no report card, but then at least the humiliation that goes with it. And then things like your parents being divorced, those things, and if you looked in that picture, the kids that jump forward, those things mean a lot. The disruption in that period, the insecurity, where we're going to stay, moving your home, where another child is in a secure environment, that gives them the opportunity and the ability to sort of grow, be strong, etc., etc. So, but what I'm trying to say is that my story is not determined by this. My story is the full story. And these are the cards that I was dealt and the place that I had to start. So what then happened? And I firmly believe in this principle. There's been many principles that sort of talk about different things. I think the most popular person the person who made this most popular is Michael Gladwell in his book Outliers. And he really talked about a basic principle that says it takes 10,000 hours for you to work towards mastery of whatever field that you're in. And I think 10,000 hours is an estimation, some more, some a little bit less. But it really talks about if you want it, you've got to work hard at it. There's no magic. Jury doesn't sit here magically appearing as the CEO of the organization. It took 10,000 hours, him working in an organization like Accenture. And I remember we worked very, very long hours. You know, sometimes we went home, sometimes we didn't go home. And that was sort of the game at the time. But the point is, if you do not put self into it and become brilliant at what you do, you'll always be second best. The difference between people that do really, really well in life and those that don't do that well in life is called hard work. It's as simple as that. That's the delta. There's no magic. There's no good luck. And almost talk and think about every story of someone today that we consider a master. And what I did is I just got most of the masters that I know, right? If you think about Beyonce, they were performing at night, moved to being homeschooled. By the time she was 21, and she was like, this pop star has popped up. She didn't pop up. She'd been popping up for the past probably 14 to 15 years of music show after music show, talent show after talent show, practicing your craft, your skill, your voice, etc. If you think about Chet Leclerc, and I don't know how many of you know the story, but he talks about when he made the decision that he wanted to be a swimmer and he wanted to be in the Olympics. He had a parent at the time that had cancer. He missed every sort of family holiday that they had to go to. He trained like night and day because he had made his decision slightly later on in life in terms of doing this. Oprah Winfrey, I'm not going to go there because all of us know the story. I mean, Michael Jackson, there were many stories about his dad abusing them because of the fact that they were child workers at such a young age. They performed I guess for money, but he'd been practicing his craft, and even to today, he's the top pop star that ever lived. The story of Michael Jordan, not chosen for basketball. In fact, he loved baseball. Not chosen initially to play basketball. Gave up everything, stopped going anywhere, and practiced solid for like 2 years before he was then chosen and became part of the NBA. Today, he's the top. He is number 1477 of the richest people in the world. I can't imagine how much money that is. The story of Steve Jobs, I don't have to repeat it. And you could see with Steve Jobs, I think the most amazing thing is that because they were delivering hardware and software, you can see the transition over time. And for those of you who've watched the movie, you can see how they paint the picture of his like neurosis around perfection, around getting it right, around getting it wrong, then trying again, getting it wrong, then trying again. By the time this thing came out, this had been in the making for the past 20 years in terms of just trying to make it perfect. Serena and Venus Williams, 3 years old, tennis racket in hand. It's not what's the word? I guess luck that they show up and have won like 14 Grand Slams. All of it is around honing in your craft, and the difference between the people that are at the top of any business and those that are in the middle, and there's nothing wrong with being in the middle. You can pedal along. I think that's probably 90% of the population, but it just depends what you want. Do you want to be at the top or you want to be at the bottom? And for me, these are the basics. If we don't get this right, the other things just can't follow. Oh, and then the little girl that pops up at the right. You know, I had to think about, because I wasn't, you know, unlike all of these people that are here, I think they chose like a given sort of profession and they went into it. And then they went hard into it. And I thought about what is my story? And I guess it's a little bit about a story of leadership. And when I thought about it is, I used, without knowing, and now I know, obviously, and therefore I can really try and hone into my skill and my craft. But I used every opportunity. So I wasn't born a leader, and I don't think anybody's born a leader. Nobody's born anything, because really, in apartheid South Africa, was everybody born a hating person. People become something based on habitual things that they do over and over again and become better and better at them, even if they're good or bad. And the things that I thought about was, I actually, if I look at my entire life, I took every single opportunity. Forget the cards I was dealt, Forum House, apartheid South Africa at the time, etc. Forget that. Whenever an opportunity showed up, I really used that opportunity to get better. So I'll give you some examples. So my sister was born 2 years after me. That was an excellent opportunity to start learning how to use my leadership muscles. In passing around. No, but more seriously, if I think about school, so I got to go to a private school when I was in what you call standard 3, which is grade 5. Brilliant. Which is grade 5. And I mean, the transition was quite a big transition, right? In a township school, you have no sporting facilities, you have no grounds, this was like, what is happening? Manna from heaven has landed. Like, we had grounds and we had different, tennis. There was a tennis racket, softball. I'd never heard of the sport before I went to a private school. But in that situation, and I thought back on my school career, both in junior school and in high school, every single opportunity. I think by the time I was in matric, I had full colors. I was on the Southern Transvaal team for softball. I was cheerleading captain. I was deputy head girl. If you had to look at all the things I could have become, those things I sort of leveraged. And that's, again, it's just about a muscle, being able to then exercise a muscle and being able to practice as sort of skills. So at a young age, practicing as a deputy head girl, you have responsibility to lead certain things in regards to your peers, in regards to your school. As an honor student means that you have to be all-rounded in terms of how you do from a sporting perspective, or this or that. So you have to lead in that. So all of that stuff. And I remember at university, and again, there was no notion. So I'd never read a book. I'd never understood what it means. But there was the Commerce Student Council, and there was an organization called ISEC. Commerce Student Council. To win the race or to win the election, we bought the election. But that also shows innovation. And there was no rule book that said you can't. So for everyone who voted for us, we gave them a chocolate. So you vote, and we won by landslide, because university kids are very, very persuaded by important things, like chocolate. But again, going just back to the point, the ability to be able to lead in the context of peers in a university setting, having the ability to work with the dean of the university, et cetera, et cetera. Then we had ISEC. ISEC is an international organization, and it's really about solving issues and problems. I don't know for those of you at ISEC in university, but working with other schools and community. And our ISEC at Wits University had died a while ago, and we just revived it. And for those of us who revived it, we had then the portfolios within the community, within the committee. And I was the president, my friend was the vice president, my other friend was the secretary. And to just finalize the story, again, an opportunity to lead within a particular context, to take an organization that had died, to bring it to fruition again. This is almost like the idea of a startup, to be able to have relationships with other universities, to travel in that context as the president of this organization in this particular university. It's skills that you're gaining along the way, and it's the 10,000 hours sort of practice, if you want to call it that way. And can I say this? Without the 10,000 hours, and even getting to whether you get to Accenture and getting to Discovery, the power of the 10,000 hours was, if you don't do the basic right, nobody's going to recognize you, to mentor you, to sponsor you, to etc. It would take a very big person to say, I see raw talent, but they're not trying. They're not your parents. This is real life. This is work. So you have to be amazing. How do you push yourself past the people around you so that somebody takes you and says, geez, I want to do something with this person because I can see what they bring to the table. So really, the notion of 10,000 hours for me is fundamental. I say this to my kids all the time. My little girl is doing rhythmic gym. We're on holiday. She went to rhythmic gym. We found rhythmic gymnastics in Durban while we were on holiday, and she was going for 2 to 3 hours. We got back for a competition. She's 9 years old. She's competing with the under 11 because that's the youngest you can compete at that level. The under 11 is the first. And she's just been chosen for Central Gauteng. We're going to the next competition. And I say to her, baby, it's not a miracle. If you don't get it, it's because you didn't practice. There's no silver wand. You have some basic talent, but you've got to work at it. And that's the basic principle. Then the third one I wanted to talk to you about is that change is a catalyst for growth. I can tell you now, if all things were to remain constant, none of us would want anything to change. If it feels good, you want it to stay the same. And I think often people are gripped by fear that, work is going so well, or my marriage is going so well. Then the fear that grips you is, it might change. Everything feels negative in terms of the change. And what I've come to learn is that, and I think I don't need to say to you, you work in consulting, change is a constant. So you work with different clients all the time, and every time you get in, new dynamics, new relationships, new requirements, culture, et cetera, et cetera. But fundamentally, the biggest changes in your life, the biggest, probably most painful or traumatic, will give you the biggest growth of your life. And if we stop fearing it, it can be such a powerful catalyst to move you literally in terms of where you play next. And I found this quote, which I loved. It says, in our rush to make our pain and problems go away, few of us ever explored the potential of acceptance. Who knew it could be such a powerful force for change? And acceptance, and I'm not going to read the rest, in this context, doesn't talk about saying, yes, it's the change, we are restructuring, they have to cull this particular team by 10%, and I might be impacted. It's about saying, what are the hardcore facts? What is it in terms of the situation that I'm facing? Because that's not going to change. Right here, right now, what is it? Not making it bigger than what it is, which is usually what happens if it's a negative change. It consumes you so much. And in fact, this is just scientific. Your mind responds to negative change. It multiplies it exponentially 5 times. And to something positive, it demeans or diminishes what is positive. So how do you look at it right here, right now? And then in the context of understanding it, making a decision about what you want out of the change. At Discovery, we have a rampant change. We have over 8,000 people, and people are moved, new divisions created, people moved around, and often it's not what people want. It's just what happens as a consequence of our growth and expansion and where we need to go. And you see the fear, immediately when you hear like we're restructuring, let's say a division, people are thinking about my job, my food, my whatever. There isn't even an opportunity to say, what do I want to see at the end of this change? And the story I thought I would tell you about this, because I've changed, I've told you, 14 years, 6 jobs. And that's like two a job every 2.5 or so years. So for me, if you work at Discovery, you have to brief change or you have to find another place to be. But I thought the change I would talk to you about is quite a personal change, and it was a change. I got divorced, which is one of the most traumatic things you can go through. Some people say death is easier. I haven't had big death. No, seriously, from a psychological perspective, meaning that because you can put proper closure to something, even as hard and as difficult and as hurtful as it is. Well, with divorce, there's closure, but there's ongoing interaction for the rest of your life. And for many people, this interaction can be very negative. And we've done an excellent job at it. It was very hard, but I have to say we've done an excellent job at it. But I wanted to give you a few nudges that would apply to anything in your life around big, significant changes. The first thing was to understand that this is happening. This is the card that I'm dealt. Whether I like it, not like it, etc. And you can alter it, by the way. So divorce is not a straight line, right? There are multiple sort of pathways that you can take. But now it was going in a particular path. And I remember thinking to myself, I mean, this thing called divorce is not easy. For those of you that have gone through it, it's not an easy experience, and I don't wish it on anyone. But I remember thinking that at the end of this, I'm going to be amazing. This is not a dress rehearsal. This is still my life. And this person journeyed with me for a while, but they're going to journey with me no more. And therefore, what do I want from it? And I remember thinking, and I needed to visualize, and visualization has been a very good thing. Like, what I want to see at the end of this. I wanted to be happy. I could see my kids happy. What did that mean? And you know, whenever you do something like that, you make a decision. You put a thought out in the universe. You actually start a series of events actually happening. And also, you will yourself to walk that direction. So as opposed to walking an absolute terrible and hard journey, not that it's not hard, there was a journey that I think was categorized a lot by love. And I'll give you a reason why I'm saying this. So at a certain point, when we were divorced, my ex-husband moved on, but they continued to live in, I moved out, and they continued to live in our home, our last home, together. And this was a home that we chose when I was pregnant with our second child. This is where we would be forever. It's an acre, you know. And these decisions you must make because, like I said, it's not a dress rehearsal. If you're happy today, you know, stay with the happiness today. And then our decision was, whenever we have birthdays, which we alternate for the girls, we would have them at a separate venue, just to allow people to heal and to be okay, and our families, obviously there are human beings involved in this. And the one year he then asked me, is it okay? And it was, I think, a year after. She would like to have Mulebo, our little one's birthday, at home. And you know, this is Johannesburg, so I never knew how popular you could be, but try go through a major transition in your life. And I remember we invited friends, and I thought, geez, everyone is going to come. And what they're going to be watching for is, how are they behaving? How's the new person? How is she? And I knew that was what's going to happen. And those were the cold hard facts. These were the cards. And I said, it's okay, you can do this thing. And I remember praying about it, and I said, God, what I want is I want to have so much love for these people. I want to get there, and what must consume me is love. Obviously, you must say it first, because it's not consuming you at the time. It's going to consume me later. And I wanted, because I'd made peace with, I mean, we're divorced and we're very good to each other, but whenever you walk into a new situation, it brings up new things. And I remember we went there, and it was the most spectacular birthday. And I introduced all my friends who came to his partner, and I said, she did this birthday, it's so wonderful, etc. And I felt it, and I felt so happy. And you must remember, this home that was mine, certain furniture hasn't changed. It's like how? I'm in my kitchen. This is still the same table. But it was so amazing because I'd made a decision about what outcome I wanted. So the steps I walked, the emotions that followed it, the outcome that I was going to have was going to be fundamentally different than walking into the situation with fear, anger, anxiety, etc. And I remember at the end of the evening, it was about 9:30, and everybody had gone. And there were sort of three sets of couples left. So him and his partner, another friend that we both knew as well, and their partner, and me, and sort of a friend partner at the time, very confusing. But we all sat around the fire and we're talking, and these two people said, we actually can't believe it. It feels like you're two old friends with no history but goodness between the two of you, that you'd have something like this and they'd come to our home before when it was our home, and now they've come as a different home. And it really, for me, just the process, like I said, Divorce is a very difficult thing. I would never recommend it for anyone. But the process and what it's brought me to, even in the workspace, around how I relate to people, how I'm able to separate the non-delivery, which we have to deal with, but the human emotion, and that we're real people with real emotion, and how you treat people with kindness and love, because at the end of the day, that's what the world is about, has been quite fundamental. Also, how I look at things that were, it's a train smash, and without me, it's going to break. It's not going to break. Life is going to continue, and quite powerfully so. People matter. This one I'll be very quick about. When you work in an organization, any organization, find people that will support you and sponsor you. This is given that you're doing the basics right? You're brilliant at your job. The 10,000 hours is a given. You make mistakes like everybody else, but you find people that support you. I love this quote by Sylvia and Hewitt. It says, sponsorship is about leadership tapping the shoulders of the next ambitious generation and grooming them for top positions. Your sponsor doesn't have to work at your current company, but a good sponsor will have connections in places you want to go. And some of the things that you need to look out for is that your sponsor needs to be powerful enough to be able to position you in open doors. You need to think they're powerful and respect them greatly. Your sponsor needs to believe in your value as a professional, which means that they've seen you deliver and they think they can back you. And your sponsor also needs to back you so that you can take real risks. And I want to just give you one story about myself. So when I joined Discovery, I joined, like I said, with Prue Health, et cetera, and I had been there only a few months. And I remember in that few months, I think I was 25. And I remember in that few months, at the time, the group COO, there was an opportunity and he had sent word that he wants me to apply to it. I was like, but why? And who's this guy? And having so much fun. I'm traveling to the UK. Yes. And I was doing almost management consulting work. It was a startup. So we're setting up processes. We're setting up sort of the different divisions in terms of this business, etc., both in the UK with partners in the UK, such as the gyms in the UK, etc., and in South Africa. And he wanted me to apply for this role. This role was moving from being a 25-year-old. Yes, I've run other things and I've gotten some experience, but to running a quarter of our business with over 400 people who run different divisions, who collect and reconcile a quarter of all of the revenue that comes into this business, has all the stakeholders, clients, etc. And I was like, this is a little bit, I wasn't really, I think youth makes you quite naive. So I wasn't really daunted about, of course I could do this. But I couldn't understand why he's saying I should apply. It just made no sense to me. And he'd probably seen me at 2 presentations. And thank goodness, because Accenture did at some point send you to training and stuff, including overseas, and also gives you some real guts in terms of going to interact with stakeholders that don't look or feel like you and having to push through boundaries. So obviously when I stand up and present, I sound knowledgeable, I was solid, and maybe that was different to sort of in a normal bricks and mortar type of organization. But I applied for this role, and I think apply. He's the group COO. It fell under him. And I got this role. So at 24 years old, I was catapulted into a senior executive at this business, sitting on his operational exco, etc. And it was a journey like no other, and such a powerful experience for me because I think I understand almost all of the business. So when I sit at exco or at board, I feel quite comfortable at home because I've played in the different spaces of our business throughout my career. And understanding operations is understanding a huge part of a business that runs at that scale. And I remember I worked in this opportunity, but it's not an opportunity, and I learned later on in life, because at 25, I thought I was doing a great job, and I think I did a decent job. But I learned later on in life that this is not the kind of work that gives me energy. I'm not an operational leader of 1 million and wanting to deliver through them. I came from a consulting background, and what I know and what's in me is about solutioning and how do we change things. And I remember this most sobering moment around this sponsor, so who had sponsored me to get this role. And I was playing in this role, and it was maybe 2 years later. And I remember we went to an exco breakaway. And at the exco breakaway, there were 4 service executives that sat in different regions. I was the Gauteng one, then there was KZN, Durban, etc. And I remember I was sitting in the exco, it was the exco breakaway, the ops service exco breakaway, and people were presenting. And the first service exec came up And he talked about the name they'd given to the team. They're the Red Hot Chili Peppers from Durban. And I thought, what? So, because I hadn't connected that my job is about the people, delivering through the people. And then he went on to talk about how in each of so in the call center space, we've moved from this perception score from clients to this perception score, how we helped guys get there, what we're doing in terms of their calls. And then he talked about the relationship building, what they've done with the broker houses, Alex Forbes and NMG, in terms of building the relationship, etc., using their people. In the billing space, how now their reconciliations were so good, etc. So we talked about all of that. And then I thought, oh my God, I'm going to be fired. Because my presentation was about platforms, systems that could connect all of us across the regions. A new call center platform, because at the time, it was really basic. It was, the call goes into Gauteng. It has to first go into Gauteng. But if it doesn't find someone in Gauteng, it has to wait for somebody else in Gauteng. So we needed like a global platform of who's first available in whatever region, skill-based, and people who have proficiency in this and that. And that's what I had done. And this is not my job. And then there was a team of people who's like the internal consultants whose job it was to do this. And I remember they kept looking at the COO and looking at me. And I remember thinking, maybe if I can start a fire, or there could be a siren, then we'll need to adjourn today before I present. Then tomorrow my presentation can be about the people and how I'm driving, what the initiatives we're doing in terms of driving and delivering through our people. And this was my presentation, and there was no fire. I did the presentation, but fundamentally what came out, and the power of a sponsor, is that I think at that moment the penny dropped for him that he had placed me in the wrong space. And he worked the next available opportunity, and it was an opportunity for a startup in another part of our business that needed us to focus. And that's where he put me, and he sponsored it hard, in terms of leveraging people around him. And you know what's so amazing? Until probably about 7 years ago, I didn't even realize what that man, I'm 40, so that sort of puts it in context. I didn't realize what this man had done in terms of championing my career. And he put me then again in a line that allowed me to breathe and allowed me to grow quite quickly in the business. So fundamental, guys, don't just do the difference between the guy that makes it and the guy that doesn't is they get on better projects. They have more challenging work. They get the best clients. Their work shines more. Not because the other guy is not that good, but if you have a sponsor that understands the job of a sponsor and does mostly sponsoring and some of the mentoring because you're doing the basic right, you'll go different places to your friend in a business. And then finally, the soil needs to be fertile. I don't know how many of you have heard about this philosophy, but pay to quit. Amazon does it. It started with Zeppo before they were part of Amazon. And I think there's another organization. Very basic philosophy. I think it was Zeppo when they started it. When you started at work, they gave you $1,000 check. And they said, if you want to, at any point that you want to quit, then you can cash the check. $1,000 is no small change, and they usually or mostly did it in sort of entry-level roles. So if you want to quit, then you can cash. If you stay, you can cash it, right? And the basic philosophy is that you want to keep people in an organization that want to be part of that organization. You want to let go of people who don't want to be part of the organization and whose culture doesn't merge with the organization. Two things. I think it's common sense, so I don't have to quote a lot of research. It's common sense that if you're in a place that doesn't give you energy, where the culture doesn't fit with you, where the values are, one, you don't want to come. For those of you, think about your child. Whenever they find themselves in a bad space at school, etc., they start not wanting to go to school, start having issues around anxiety, not eating, etc., etc. If you're not in a place that gives you energy, you are going to fail. And I say this over and over again, and I hope you hear me. This is not your dress rehearsal. It's your one life. So putting yourself in a place where you are negative all the time can only cost you a lot of issues, including mental issues, mental illness issues, which includes depression, anxiety, etc., etc. And some people say, but I love it. I love BSG. I just hate my manager. Then move your manager. Find another manager. Find another team to be in. Or work with a sponsor or mentor to try help you with your current manager. Don't find yourself. we all go through difficult patches. Hopefully it's a cycle. But if you're finding yourself perpetually in a space where you're not growing, you need to get out of that space. You're actually going to give you issues that you don't need. For an organization, it's very simple. All engagement data and engagement research tells you that the people who are least engaged impact you significantly. There's obviously the productivity, they're present, but they're not doing the work that they have to do. There's opportunity cost, but also they become a cancer because the people around them then start feeding off it. And all of a sudden, the opportunity cost is not one person, it's multiple people not adding the value they could be to the organization and taking away from the organization. So these organizations, Amazon now does $5,000. That's not small change. That's about, in our rand terms today, about 75,000 rand. They do $5,000, and they say in the first year you get 1,000, second year up to, so they give you each year, but it's capped at 5,000. So at any point when you say I decide to quit, you can cash it out, and that is because they are so clear about the power of an engaged workforce and a happy workforce, and the deterrent to that, which is the people that are not happy. So they continue to incentivize you to leave until hopefully you sort of leave their doors. So critical, put yourself in a place that gives you energy. And when you're not in that place, find a way to go. And then maybe, and it's not part of the slide, but it's what the one lady asked me. What I found in terms of work-life balance. So you asked me as a mom, because I also take very seriously as a woman. Like, I have to live my life and have a good time on this earth. I find there's no such thing as balance. I'm on leave. I say it carefully, but I was doing work yesterday, and I was on conference calls, and I'm reviewing contracts, but I'm on leave. But you know what I find, and this is the best advice I've ever gotten. There's no balance. Because, in fact, in balance, it's hard to find brilliance. If I showed you all of those people, none of them have balance. Michael Jordan was known to be the first person at gym and the last one to leave, always. If you look, not Michael Jordan, Michael Jackson was ridiculous. In fact, I think some of that training for his tour sort of killed him. For me, balance is about, sorry, I can't hear myself. Okay, I'll push past it. When I'm in control of the different aspects of my life, I feel balance. So if I'm in control and I understand with my kids, they're in a good space, they're feeling solid, they're being supported at school, doing well, it doesn't mean that I'm seeing them and I'm present. I enlist tutors and I enlist people that help pick up the kids, drop off the kids. I choose what I want to do with them. So I've never done bath time. I did it when they were very small, when I was still in the euphoria. Bath time is so important. It's not important. But what is important for me is to sit down around the table with them, because they're old enough, and have a conversation about how was your day, or to cook with each other. And I feel empowered because I feel like, oh, I know what's happening. And we pray together every day, and I lie with each little person, and I ask them stuff. And whenever they want to tell me something, they tell me in that lie moment. And that's balance because I feel I've got it, I'm in control. Work is exactly the same. I've come to know that it's impossible to do it all and to feel like I've done it, and I've done it brilliantly. It's impossible. So certain things, I literally just let go of and say, those ones, even if they fall off the table, nothing breaks. These ones, if they fall off the table, then I'm in shit. And those ones I'll focus on hard. So whenever I feel I'm just in control, if any of these things I don't feel in control of, then I feel out of balance. So you thrust yourself 150% at each one of them the best you can, and certain things will fall off. Just be comfortable about the things that fall off. I hope that was helpful.
What I wanted to talk to you, or what I wanted to ask about was, do you find value in bringing like your authentic self or your true self to work? Because each organization has different cultures and norms. So like, do you find value in being yourself? Because sometimes you get sucked into the. There's what kind of challenges have you faced as a woman to be your true self?
Thanks. Great question. I guess fundamentally for me, the first place to start is that you've got to be in alignment with the culture and the values of an organization. So I can't come to your home and try impose all of me and we completely clash. So there's first and foremost, be in alignment. And if you're not in alignment, so if one of our values, which it is at Discovery as an example, is great people, but I treat people badly, that's a problem. I need to find another place to be. I can be authentic somewhere else, but I can't be authentic at Adrian Gore's organization where he's chosen a particular value. So I think authenticity is critical because you can't operate on anything else. Because if you're not authentic, you're always going to trip up. You're trying to do and be what you're not meant to be, and you're trying to play the games that you can't play. So one is be in alignment with the values and culture, and once you are, be authentically you, and the environment will allow it, if that makes sense. If you're not in alignment with the values and culture, you can be authentic, but you're going to have a very short lifespan at the organization.
Thank you.
Cool. Do we have any questions from the audience? No? Oh. Okay. Musa, can you stand up, please?
It's a brilliant question. So I think a lot of my approach to work, and I think to life, is sort of throw yourself in it, right? And push hard. And I think my first assumption is not, it's happening to me as a woman. It could be, but it's never been my first assumption. It's also not been my first assumption that it's happening to me as a Black woman, which is another sort of big hurdle that you have to jump. But what I've actually, one of the biggest things that I think we struggled with as an organization, and I don't think it's unique to us, and we've made great strides towards sort of fixing that, is that for a very long time, the executive layer didn't have women. We're in a very different space, and I'll explain. And I think one of my biggest challenges was something called stereotype threat, which I learned later. But the concept of stereotype threat says that you will confirm stereotypes in understanding the stereotypes and knowing that everybody has the same stereotype about you. When you try to run away from it, you sort of confirm it. So when I first sat on Exco, I remember a while ago, the business Exco, I was the only woman, and I was the only Black woman, and I was the youngest at the time in the team. And I remember I actually couldn't speak. Do you see how much I speak? I love to speak. I love to engage. That's who I am. And I always have an opinion about something. But I actually couldn't voice out that opinion. And that was and I remember I would think about, but this is what I want to contribute. And somebody else would contribute it. No, brilliant idea, brilliant, we must do that. That was my idea. And the challenge is when you don't see the role modeling within the spaces in which you work, you immediately confirm the stereotypes. Women don't contribute as much in that kind of forum at that level. So you find yourself not contributing that much. So I think my biggest sort of challenge has been to find role models in the business at a very senior level to be able to look up to so that I can say, even I. So before I sat on the Discovery Health board, I remember I went to present, and this was this year. I went to present at board, and I presented, but it was so bizarre. Everybody in the room was male. Mostly white male, but there was like one or two Black male. And I remember walking away and thinking, I'm sure people were absent. I mean, we have non-execs and execs. So obviously they were absent. So I went to the EA after that to say, please can you pull me a list of who actually attends board, because I just come back from sabbatical. So I'd missed something. And he pulled the list. And there were no women. I was so taken aback. I was actually going to approach my CEO. And then there was an announcement. And I don't know how that happened. It's probably the universe. But for me, the biggest challenge is to see people that look like us, meaning women, whether Black or white women, and be able to aspire. Today, at Discovery Health level, at the Exco level, almost 40% of all of the leaders, including the CIO, who's a woman, and COO, who's a woman, etc., head of risk, all of those people are women. And it's taken a journey, but before you see it, it is really hard to believe that you can be it, and how you participate and how you contribute. So that's been quite a journey. And I think we haven't done enough, hey? I think we can do much more as an organization.
Fantastic. Thanks, Musa. We'll move on to Liz. Ask a question.
Hi, Nonku.
Hello.
Thanks for being here today. So there's just a bit of background to my question. So recently, Mangalan Pillay, who is the CEO of the South African Institute of Civil Engineering, published an article in the Civil Engineering magazine, July issue, where he questions whether South Africa should invest in women who are in STEM careers. And I think he further adds in the article that the fact that more men occupy executive posts is tremendous, not because they are men, but because of their greater appetite for workload and the extreme requirements at those executive levels. So the question that I wanted to pose to you is, what is your view or what is your take on these ideas? And do you think there's anything that we need to do to change these mindsets?
I think it's absolute nonsense. And I think that in 2018, it's actually not only nonsense, but it is arrogant and it's actually irresponsible to make statements like that and for us to publish those statements. But I guess the media, you know, the more it can be sensationalist. And it's actually absolute nonsense. And this is not absolute nonsense from my opinion. There's tons of research. So I think if I can go back to that video, with respect, I think there are many great men that do many great things. They just started, though, at a very different place in their lives than where women start. Period. Done. The second thing is that all research demonstrates that our minds are wired for shortcuts in a particular way. And the way that our minds are wired is basically how we've been raised. So can I tell you, there's research from the UK that says, if you put two men in front of you, so if I put Jury, who's shorter than Jury in this room?
Everyone.
Many people. But I want a male. And I put two white males next to each other. Same ability. The other one even has better credentials in terms of on paper, on a CV. Jury will win every time because society is wired into our brains that a CEO is a tall, white, usually slightly gray man. Every time he'll win. Do you know if I put two people in an interview, a chubby one and a slim, attractive one, the slim, attractive one will win almost 99% of the time. This is how brains are wired. It's not because those people are better. There is, I think it was Harvard. I'm not sure if it's Harvard or Stanford. They did a research piece, and some of you might have seen it. They took two candidates, actors, exactly the same answer, exact to the T, scripted answers. They then put a panel of students who were studying with them, and in that panel of students, they had male and female, and those male and female students then got to interview them. At the end of the interview, they said, who do you choose? Identical answers. The male student says, I choose the guy. They say, why? It's like, I found that the woman was a bit arrogant and like came off too strong, like not empathetic, doesn't care. They asked the woman. The woman says exactly the same thing. She wasn't good. Her experience didn't seem right. Quite arrogant, Then they showed them exactly the same answer. These are scripted actors. And what's dangerous is even in the minds of women, we have the same wiring and the same biases and the same shortcuts. So we discriminate against women in exactly the same way that men discriminate against women. And why that is nonsense, disrespectful, and so dangerous is because it continues to reinforce the rubbish stereotypes. Today, more than 50% of the international workforce are women. They're not only working, taking care of kids within the homes, they're also, in many instances, single-headed households. And then maybe I'll say the last example. Stanford did research. A guy called, I think, Aronson Steele, if I'm not mistaken, did research at Stanford. Because what they couldn't understand is that the girls who entered university in doing subjects such as engineering, medicine, etc., entered with higher SAT scores than the boys by far, like by a mile. But at Stanford, they performed continuously less than their male counterparts. And it was like, this is bizarre, this doesn't make sense. But you know what? The halls are decked out with huge pictures of male professors that achieved this and that, continuously reinforcing in your mind that you're less. And the thing of stereotypes to it is real. The more you see cues in your environment that say you are less than, you will never be, that's who you will be. You will reinforce, you will actually submit to a stereotype. And what they did in their research, they took 3 groups. And please, if I fudge the thing slightly, you can look up the research piece properly yourself. But in the 3 groups, the one group where they told people, let's say it was a group of black and white students, they said, we want to see who's smarter, black or white students in terms of this. The black students did badly every single time because you reinforced the stereotype. Then they took another group, let's say they say, we want to see who does better at mathematics and science, boys or girls. The girls did worse every single time. When they took a group and they said something like, but just agnostic. We just want to see what subjects you're most inclined to be interested in. So we're testing math, science, art, etc. The girls, by far, did better than anyone else in that group. And it just shows the cues you put out first will determine how people. So if in a test you just put at the top something about color or gender or whatever, immediately the people you are discriminating against will do worse. So to put it quite simply, in many instances, and at Discovery we have it, we have our CRO who's a woman, we have a lot of her exco who are women. And as soon as you put the first cue out that says it's real, it's acceptable, women can be, other women come up quite easily. It's almost a de facto. So really, I think I actually have no time for this person and their question.
Do we have any questions? Okay, Nondu will take you first and then Lorraine.
Hi, Nonku. Thank you so much for gracing us with your presence today. My question is a follow-on question from what you've just said. What does this mean for BSG's interviewing process? You know, I just wanted to get more advice around that because it's something that's wired into our brains. So how do we, as we look for more talent and diversify our organization, how do we proactively guard against that? Yep.
Thanks. We actually did a lot of work around this. And we also did a book study at EXCO, the Work Rules book by our brains, is that you create panels, and in those panels you create equality of voice. And I think some people who have done it, so McKinsey do it, and I'll tell you what they do, and Google also does it, and we actually went to visit them and we spoke to the head of in this talent area in Israel. And what they do is in the panel, so Google does a 30-minute interview, they say anything more is unnecessary. Like if you don't know what you want in 30 minutes, you probably don't. But they give it 45 minutes because the person must also answer. And they look for different things. But one of the key things that they do is that they look for things like googliness. But to find googliness, you don't need a manager, right? You need a top performer who fits into this culture, who is incredible, who when you look at you like, oh, I see and feel BS. That they have obviously somebody who's honed into the skill you're looking for, etc., etc. And within that panel, people are looking for specific things that they find in terms of that. And each person's contribution and voice counts equally. So rank doesn't go. In fact, in his book, Laszlo Bock says, let the lunatics run the asylum. So he says, don't let managers make decisions about hiring people because be the manager that people keep leaving for a reason. You are the problem. So it just says, if you create panels, and in those panels you create a structure for people to give feedback, what McKinsey does is they have a formal thing that you have to, each person who interviews has to fill in for each question in detail and give a scoring. Those things that then put together, but your score is not better than my score because I might be the CEO and you might be the manager in operations. Our scores count equally. So I think critical diverse panels that represent the organizations in different ways. Yes, race, gender, values, etc. And then finding a way to balance those scores together. And that's what we've done. So we try and do empirical data, but we've very much moved to what does a discovery person look and feel like. We've defined the attributes of that discovery person, and then we try interview against that. And, you know, it's so incredible. And I'll give you my final nudge. So I sat in this year, we do what we call the Adrian Gore, finding the top actuary in the country. We put them through their paces over a couple of weeks. But one of the things we do is presentations to like the board and then interviews. And I remember this black guy came in and he is smart as hell. He comes from a tree school, tree. You can't believe they exist. And he presents his slides. Are basically a template with nothing. He obviously hasn't found design on that PowerPoint thing. but with points. But the points are so powerful, point and make sense. They couldn't hear him. This is like a month and a half ago. And at the end of the presentation, one of our guys said, and he's Indian, our CEO for Vitality, he said, that guy came up with solutions that we could implement tomorrow. And I made the point, even in that panel, you're embarrassed to like raise your hand for him because everyone is thinking, no, it's not our guy. And if the founders are not thinking he's our guy, how do I think he's our guy? And at that point, I felt empowered to also and I said, it is our biases. You can't even hear him because his accent is a Betty accent. The girl who came before was slick and smart. Her presentation showed that she had been exposed to building presentation, simple in her way. Her ideas slightly less powerful than the ideas from this guy, and she won. And I guess the point is that unless we find ways to guard against these things, and like I say, in that meeting, I felt I was far outranked. I felt, and I'm executive, I've been here for 14 years, I sit at board, I sit at Exco, but in that meeting, I felt if nobody else is putting up a hand, it made me feel a little bit, until somebody else who is more, I guess, he's the CEO of one of our businesses, put up his hand and said, guys, but did we really do this right? So it's such a subtle but most powerful thing, and it needs to be led from the top. So unless your senior executives endorse it, and then you find ways to structurally. So I would say if you can, visit Google, speak to McKinsey. They easily offer, we just visited and we talked to them and they showed us what they do. This stuff can really help us know how to navigate and take out the biases from stuff.
Nonku, I just wanted to say, really, this has been an incredible talk to hear from you. And I just wanted to thank you because we definitely don't hear from enough strong women like you. And this is incredibly inspirational. My question is, I have quite a lot of friends who have had kids. And I think one of the challenges that I'm interested to hear your view on is how, because I think you get a lot of women that can move up into leadership roles who then have children, and then coming back into leadership roles and running a family becomes quite a challenge. And I think I'm interested to know your view on how do you keep women moving up into those senior leadership roles who also want to have families. You were talking earlier about there not being balance, so to speak. How do you see that working?
I don't. It's the truth. I'll give you my experience. So I had my baby. I was on the up and up. I was running up that ladder. Not because of merit only, like I told you about the sponsor, etc. And I really felt I was going in the right direction. And I remember I had my first baby. And I'm not I thought I would have one, mommy. I've always been like, I want to be in the working world and I want to do this and that. And I remember coming back and I actually said to my boss, it feels like I stepped backwards. Not my level hadn't changed, the rank hadn't changed, my salary, but it really feels like I stepped backwards. There are people who are getting more opportunities, who are given different exposure, etc. And you know what his answer was? And it was an honest and sobering answer, which is why I'm saying I don't. He says, Nonks, if you're in a position where you're adding significant value, a position that's important to the business, and you step away from it, what do you think the business is going to do? Going to fill it. Not that it gets a person and officially says, but they find a way that the things that were critical in what you did and the value that you brought are then somehow absorbed into the business. And he says, because if they left it open, was it very important really for you to, was your value that important? Then it would be sort of different. And the truth is, I think the world today, most organizations find a way to accommodate it. But I think in terms of growth, the speed, etc., I think it's definitely impacted. You also find new people. So your sponsor might not be there anymore. The people who knew you as the wonder kid are not in the world that you live anymore, and you have to reestablish, demonstrate ability, etc., etc. So the truth is, I think when you make decisions about having kids, you must be cognizant of what it can do to your career, and then just put some measures to counteract it. So when I was done having kids, I was very clear. I'm done having kids. I'm going places in this business. I want to go all the way. And I had to make those noises. It wasn't something I did sort of because I wanted to have a conversation. Those are, in my performance conversations, I wanted my CEO to know that I'm not here to play games. I want what is mine, and I'm going to go after it. I'll do my part, and you must do yours. And I think that's how it is today. And I think some organizations are more tolerant than others. They all have to legally give you some maternity leave, whether it's paid for or not paid for. And that, for me, is semantics. I think it's how you come back and how you integrate. I think where I'm blessed with Discovery is that family is important in general to people at Discovery. So people tolerate and very much are very amiable around the things to do with. So I'm never embarrassed or shy or concerned or hiding. I'm going to my kid's game. I won't be back. I'll work from home today. I'm not coming in tomorrow. I'm going to first go to the game and then I'm going to. And I think most environments, because today you can work easily virtually wherever you are. If they are comfortable about your level of delivery and what you can do, don't really mind about those things. And for me, those things are important. The ability to be at the most important events for my kids and make room for my kids and for my family around that. In addition to that, while I can continue to add value to the business. But I think would be foolish to think they do. I think because most people that sit at an executive level aren't the ones who give birth to a baby. They probably just can't give you the kind of empathy that you'd want and need. They'll be tolerant of it. They'll do their best around it, but you have to be the one who pushes for it. You have to be the one who comes back and says, actually, that project is too little for me. Before I left, I was doing bigger projects. You need to put me on something different that is at my level and where I want to go. And that's sort of how I've dealt with it.
Okay, Elzan, over to you.
Hi, Nonku. So inspired by your story, and I think my question touches on what you've mentioned about your the group COO as your sponsor. I'd just like to preface my question with a quote. In a talk by Dr. Judy Dlamini, she states that equality is good for the economy, good for the community, and good for our daughters. Having an equal society isn't simply a favor towards women, and we need to have men alongside us fighting for that equality. So my question is, I'd like you to expand a bit on the role of male sponsors within your journey. I know you've mentioned the group CEO. Has there been anyone who's been instrumental in helping you reach the level you have?
Yeah, I think what I've realized in my journey, I've had many sponsors. My current CEO, Johnny, is a great sponsor. I'm very blessed. What I also have realized is that I find that men are waking up more and more to it because of their own daughters. So Johnny has a daughter who's incredible. I went to a bat mitzvah. She said some speech around social justice, and I think I understood maybe 15% of it. So I can understand how the kind of home she's growing up in and how she's being empowered, etc. And I think because of that, a lot of the men are looking at their daughters and thinking, oh my God, what kind of world and what do I want for my daughter? And I often say, Johnny sometimes treats me like his daughter, and I feel it in sometimes he'll, I think, snap at me in a way that is not, then I'm like, and it's like, I mean, nonks, what I mean. But he's been like a powerful sponsor for me. And when I say a powerful sponsor, I went through, and I'll give you an example. I went through, before I went on sabbatical, so I played the role of head of Discovery Health People, and a role that I think was phenomenal in terms of my growth. I think if you're going to be a CEO of a business, understanding people is probably the most important thing you can do, and and people will do things for you. And so that role was amazing, and we worked quite closely together. And then we had an individual that I hired. Long story cut short, we went through a huge process of her leaving the business, and then I just needed, I think, a break. The incident included death threats and bodyguards, so it was quite hectic. But at the time of the sabbatical, I didn't think I needed a sabbatical. I just thought to myself, this is my life. This is not a dress rehearsal. There are things that I want to do, and it was really in the social entrepreneurship space, and therefore I wanted to take the opportunity to start doing those things. And I resigned, and he could see I'm serious because I've tried many times and stop me. But he could see I'm serious, and eventually he accepted my resignation. But then after that, it was a journey of sort of following on. And I think that's also because a powerful sponsor, I don't think he was chasing me just because I'm Nonku. It's you chasing the 10,000 hours counts, guys. So, and I speak with humility. because it's not about being pompous, but I think he did it as a sponsor for the business and stuff and me. So he was busy trying to drive these businesses on the side, and he needed me to sort of come back. So then it was sabbatical and I came back. And what I've done for him and the business in a short space of time, and I speak respectfully and humbly, is huge. And that's the role of the sponsor. And one of the words is that they must believe in your value. And when they believe in the value, they will move mountains and they allow you to take risks. So I've always played a business role. Then I played the Discovery Health People role, which was a support role. And now I'm back playing a business role. But it's not an insignificant business role. This is where we see a significant part of our revenue coming from in the next 5 to 8 years. So we're investing hugely in the space. And this came with the board appointment, the this, the that. And for me, in terms of what she's saying, is that the role of a sponsor, I think we've had many males actually that play that role simply because they've been in the positions. I think the role of a sponsor, more women need to pick up the roles. When I said yes to Julian, I said excitedly when he sent me it's not because I find it wonderful to interact with people, but it's actually something I'm trying to contribute. So this year I've done quite a lot of these talks because I think it's so important for young people in this room. The average age looks like 21. But I find it's so incredibly important to just go into spaces and say, I'm in a very, Discovery is known as a very high-paced, challenging space, etc. But it's possible and it's doable. And until we can sponsor more women and demonstrate for women, for men, etc. So I think men actually play a lot more of that. And I think it's because the positions they have. I think women can do much more. I don't care what level you are at. There's somebody you should be taking by the hand and bringing up. And I think fundamentally what she's saying is that we're the biggest contributors in terms of how we consume, how we use, how we direct, how we ratio, and all of these things that have some kind of commercial engagement. And unless you're raising us in that way and empowering us in that way, the world is just not going to be a better place. Geez, that was long. I'm sorry.
Questions? Okay.
There's a man.
Finally.
Hey, Nonku, thank you for taking time out of your diary to speak to us today. I have more of a practical leadership question, and I was wondering if you could share a scenario where you had a subordinate who really stuffed up and how you helped that subordinate get through that situation and ensure that that was a meaningful learning opportunity for them.
I've had so many. I'm going to find a good one. There are many that we've had to let go. So I'm reading through that stuff. Yeah, let me give you an example, and I think it's a good example. And in fact, it came full circle. We hired a young man. In fact, he was in his mid-30s, so maybe not so young. And I remember when we hired him, they were saying like, yeah, he's okay, but you know, he's not going to be the guy who like takes us to, because everybody must take us to the new world, etc. And the reason for that, well, I think mostly was because, again, the accent thing, you know, when you hired him, so he didn't sound as confident. This young man came in and he really did a magnificent job. In a very short space of time, managed to convince, inspire, energize, engage people at different levels, really did well. And I was really because I was betting for him. So this was really brilliant that he was doing this. About a year and a half into working for us, he started to go through a divorce. And I think it threw him for a loop. But luckily he had me, the evangelist. No. But it really threw him for a loop. I mean, I think he went from being like star performer to almost like he's at the door in terms of sort of an exit. And we worked through this stuff because I think it wasn't a performance issue based on incapacity or an inability. It was a performance issue because there's life issues happening and they were impacting his performance. And I think there were two things for me that were important. The one is that if there's good will and good history and currency from which you can work. It's an important thing to realize. So the 100,000, the 10,000 hours, this person comes from a good place. They have done their part. They've contributed meaningfully to the organization. The second is the realization that where they are, can we mend it? Can we move it to another place? And how do we do it? Which was the third. And then the third is the time period, because, right, we do run an organization. We're here in order for us to be commercially viable, or if we just start being irresponsible about how long we let these things happen, then that is quite dangerous. And I think it took about 9 months, which is no small feat, because then the exposures in the team and the things that you have to cover up and the noise that comes from the external environments that you service. And I think he came full circle. And I remember him saying, like, thank you so much, because he realized at the end of the circle that it was no small feat, that there was tolerance for this. And we had to go through, sometimes it was more informal, but also formal processes around, okay, this has happened for this time. We've given you help in terms of, from a employee assistance program perspective, from me in terms of a mentor, from this is the timeline that we can give you, et cetera, et cetera. And we did really come full circle, and his performance recovered, and he became well. Later on, his performance went bad again, but it wasn't related to that anymore. And I think, hand to heart, we could say, when we got to that point, we could have a different conversation, because it wasn't about that. And what then happened is actually that conversation ended up in a separation, and we went our different ways, and he started to do something in an area that he liked, which was farming. And I can tell you that a little while later, when I was going through a different situation, he actually called me to say to me, he wanted to give me a nudge and feedback around something that would help me. And it was around a work situation that was happening where he had input. And he did it out of his own accord and out of his own will, which demonstrates that even when it wasn't fun and happy, that the process that we followed and the ability to be able to, one, rehabilitate where it made sense, and one, to let go where it didn't make sense. It still made sense to him why we did it and the way in which we did it, which I think always with being humane and empathetic, and let go of people with dignity, even if you let them go out of the business. Last question.
Musa, I think you had a question? Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think the feedback you've given us so far in the talk has been very valuable. I just have another question, one of the final ones, is, you know how, well, we usually advise to understand our why, like have a vision of where we're going to go. Would you say at the age of 25, you knew your why, you knew you'd be where you were now, and as a result, that kind of impacted every move that you took? Or did your different life, phases kind of guide you and set that vision of where you want to be in future more clearly? Just want to get a view of, how that has been for you.
I'll start by saying, well, our head actuary's name is, the head actuary for the business is Emil. And we did he drives the whole Agent Go fellowship type of process. And we had a dinner with the guys that were in the final. And I remember him saying, there are a few decisions that you make in life that determine everything. And he was saying his own decision, like he said, where he studied, actually, in terms of where he ended up, because for actuarial sciences, certain top organizations will choose from only certain universities. He said he's a gay man. He said coming out, and when I came out and how I came out. And then I think the third one was where he decided to work as the first place. And it was amazing because I had to retrofit it, looking back, how very true that was. So I wish somebody at the beginning of my process would have said, these are the few things that you have to think about and apply yourself to, because these things matter. But the truth is I didn't. But what I did know is how great I wanted to be. So the vision I had, and I think the power of visualization, I was very clear that at some point I'll be the president of the country, and this is where I wanted to go. It's never too late. They get there at about 65, 70. So there's time. And I always spoke very boldly about, I will be an executive in a top organization in this country. So it was not a given. So the steps in terms of how to get there and what to do to get there were never clear to me. And you know what? They don't need to be. Because between what life throws at you and the decision you make in response to it, that's probably the most important thing. What each opportunity brings, whether it's positive or negative, and what you do with that opportunity. So I guess to answer your question more directly, I think one, it would have been great to know. I didn't know at the beginning the things that I know around the key decisions. And no, who to marry was the other one. He's married to a great partner. I didn't know. But what I did know is the bigger, bolder vision, which is critical because that's true north, right? So each organization, the reason we have these visions and the reason we try to inject them in people's veins to make people healthy, protect and enhance their life is our purpose. Our vision has become the best insurance organization in the world. I can say it in my sleep. I believe it. And the reason you do that is because that's true north. Because whenever you deviate, and you might, out of the path, how you come back to true north is because of that. And I think based on my true north being, I knew I was going to be a corporate in one of the, an executive in one of the top corporates in the country. That was a given for me. How I navigated in terms of how I got there was one step at a time. Now that I'm older and wiser, I don't make a step just for the step. So I didn't go back to Discovery just to go back to Discovery. I went on the sabbatical. I had no job. I was left on the payroll, but I wasn't being paid. My job, I helped to get my successor, induct her before I left. And I said, I'll go back for the role that I want. So when we had this discussion, because I know where I'm going and what I want to do, it was critical that I get myself in a position where I start running businesses, where I understand how we design these products and how we price them across the business, how we sell them, who are key stakeholders, all the way to how we service, etc. So when I went back to the business, I knew I needed to understand how to run the mechanisms of a business from start to finish. Because if I'm going to be an entrepreneur, a social entrepreneur even, that was important. So now, every step that I take is not by mistake. That I sit here is not by mistake. I'm involved in a few, what I think are critical, corporate social investment opportunities. And all of those are directed at me first learning and contributing in a way that I can contribute. So I don't necessarily contribute maybe in terms of financially, etc., but like in one of the organizations, I've partnered with the CEO to contribute around how she thinks about the next transition in terms of the organizational structure, the expanding into Africa and globally around what she needs to look like and the kind of role she needs as the chief executive officer to move them into this new world. And I partner there because I'm deliberate about it for myself and how I want to contribute in terms of this. And I think it comes with time. You need to really do a few things and exercise your muscles in a few ways. And I think had I not worked in operations, worked a little bit in strategy, worked in people, it would be very difficult to understand in what space I need to move. So I think that comes with time, and allow yourself the time. Just try to find your true north around what things give me energy and what direction do I want to move toward.
Thanks so much, Nonku, for sharing your insights with us. Jury will come and do the closing.
Everybody, thank you for your engagement. Thank you for those questions. Nonku, that was phenomenal. Thank you for your inspiration. You'll see something we talk about a lot at BSG is continuous learning. And I did share at the beginning, that's one of the reasons to get together today, is to talk, to learn, be able to have discussions around this. But in order to learn, someone has to be willing to teach. And your willingness to teach, to be open, to be vulnerable, to be completely present here in who you are and what's important to you, has really allowed us to learn a great deal. If I connect the dots, and it would be really good for everybody to reflect on some of the things that Nonku's gone through today and connecting those dots back to some of the things that we already know and talk about within BSG. But I just think some of the points, you spoke about how change drives growth. We talk about the growth mindset and having that approach to understanding that the things that you go through do allow you to grow as long as you take the opportunity to learn from that experience and to apply that learning. Visualizing the future, you mentioned it earlier, it came up again now. Imagining that future, owning your story to then get there. And like you say, it's not going to be a straightforward story. We know every project we work on, we put together a plan at the project, the plan for that project, and those plans are never going to be the way that things are going to pan out. But they allow us to make a start. And as we go along and we learn different things, we adjust that path. I love the point around balance and control. And again, it's about owning your story. What are the things that you can control? What are the things that you have to control? And how do you make sure that you create the space for those things? Also then, I think overall, just to reinforce, so my commitment, our commitment from a BSG leadership perspective is to do more, is to be more conscious, is to create a better sense of who we are within the organization, better representation, better leadership. It is going to take time, but we are already making progress around it. And I look forward to all of you and your support in terms of how we can do this more effectively. I'd really like to say thank you to Lorraine, Barbara, Itumeleng, Beverly, Janine, Jason, and the rest of the team that have been involved in setting up today from our side. For all of us, I think the most important thing is to reflect and then work out what action are you going to take. How are you going to create the future that you want to be part of for yourself and for others? Nonku, we're extremely grateful for you being here today.
Thank you for having
Thank you everyone for joining us. And I know that we've got a small gift for you.
Oh,